Oh, welcome to another episode of the Growth Compass. Shout out to our sponsor senders. If you want to do cold email deliverability correctly, hit the link in the description. And without them, it wouldn't be possible to interview awesome people doing really interesting things like Julie. Welcome.
Thanks, Blake. I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
Good. This is so awesome. I've been doing a decent amount of reading on what you guys are building. I won't spoil it for anybody. So I'm looking at this beautiful website here. I don't know how much you had to do with the putting together of this, but it looks really awesome. But before we start, if you could just give an intro of yourself and what you're building.
Cool. Yeah, Julie Kheyfets, excited to be here. I'm CEO of Block Renovation, and we are building the most trusted place to plan and hire for major renovations. So anyone who's renovated or thought about renovating knows that it's kind of a nightmare. You're spending a bunch of money, you are making hundreds of decisions, and at the end of the day, you're bringing a stranger into your home to turn it into a construction site, at which point you're kind of stuck and you're hoping and praying that it's going to go okay, that it's going to stay on budget, it's going to be on timeline. And most of the time it doesn't. And, I looked at this industry and I said, man, this is a huge industry. I mean, Americans spend $500 billion a year renovating their homes, and everybody still has a really bad experience. And there's got to be a better way to do this. And so we're using AI in a marketplace of really phenomenal contractors to offer a much better experience for homeowners trying to build spaces that they love.
Oh, there's so much that I have to learn about what you're speaking to. And before that, I'm curious. So you were a COO before you were CEO.
Mhm.
And
That's right.
before we got into the Block universe, what were you doing beforehand?
Yeah. So I started my career as a management consultant at BCG, which was a really good foundation to get to know the business world. Got to work in every industry from food to travel to pharmaceuticals to consumer goods, every function from strategy to finance to HR to marketing to sales to tech. And that was just a really great way to understand different companies, different sectors, different functions. But I always had this real hunger to go and actually build and operate. As a consultant, you do really great strategic thinking and planning, but you don't actually do the thing. You give somebody else a plan to do the thing, and then you kind of hope that they do a good job. And I really wanted the chance to go hands on and do the thing and also get the feedback and iterate and make it better and better. And so I jumped into startups. So I worked in different startups throughout my career. 13 years ago, I was at Facebook. It was rapidly
Yeah,
growing at that point, probably
I
not a
remember
startup
that.
back in 2012, 2013. But I did business operations there. And then spent 4 years at a company called Tractable that does AI for accident and disaster recovery. And Tractable is headquartered in London, and I launched and grew the North America business. And coming out of there, the folks at Block gave me a call and said, we're looking for a COO. And I said, well, I'm not really looking for a new job, but this renovation thing looks really interesting. And then I also got to know the team, and the team was really, really sharp, really humble, really committed, like tremendous ownership of figuring things out. And between the problem space, which was huge, complicated, and this amazing group of people, I decided to make the jump. So joined Block as COO, as you mentioned. I initially led growth, so sales and marketing, operations and finance, and then took on the CEO role earlier this year in January.
Well, congrats, and thank you for taking that jump
Thanks.
because it introduces the ability for us to have this convo. So
That was the main
selfishly,
benefit. That's why
yeah,
I did it.
that's right. Selfishly, I appreciate you taking that leap. So, wow, super cool, super concise. I appreciate that background. So, I'm curious. What let's just pull two things. I would say from the experience from BCG, Facebook, or Tractable, however you want to go with it. Just two main things that you brought into your role at Block that were particularly useful in helping you navigate how you approached your role.
Yeah, really good question. I would say one is user obsession. Like I really deeply believe in my heart of hearts that building a great company comes down to delivering or building something that delivers. extraordinary value to a large number of people. And you can get really clever with sales and marketing and finance and all these other things. But if your core offering, your product, your service, whatever you're putting out in the market, doesn't deliver extraordinary differentiated value, you're not building a sustainable company. And the way to build extraordinary value is to really obsessively listen to your users and to really understand them, to really deeply understand their realities. So, for example, with renovations, you might think like, well, renovations are about making a plan and making a budget and hiring a person and doing the thing. But renovations have not just those functional needs, they have so many emotional needs. So often homeowners feel completely overwhelmed, completely stuck because they're staring down hundreds of decisions. And so many people get started, make their way a couple of steps down the path, kind of shut down, get really nervous and stop. And like all of those realities, you have to really understand when you build for people. So that user obsession is one big thing I took away. Um, the other big thing is the importance of just constantly iterating and learning. I think when you build a company, especially in the early stages, yeah, you're trying to deliver results and grow revenue and drive economics, but more than anything, you're trying to uncover signal as quickly as possible. And that signal about your users and what they need. It's about how you can build a product that fulfills those needs. It's how you can distribute that product. And in the pursuit of that signal, sometimes you hit roadblocks and you do things, you launch initiatives, you start projects, they fail, results don't come through. That's okay as long as you keep learning. The worst thing you can do is stop learning. And so I would so much rather lead a company, especially in the early days, that like maybe has a bad month or maybe has a bad quarter, but you actually figure out why and you use that signal versus build something that's like constantly in stasis where you lose sight of learning, you lose sight of signal, and you're just trying to maintain the status quo.
So how well, just want to pause. Thank you, because those two things were awesome. And I'm curious because you used Block as a specific example. So when you're talking about being user obsessed and also uncovering signals as quick as possible, what did that look like for you when you came in at Block? Were they in stasis? Did you have to uncover some lever and successfully did so, or were they writing a type of momentum, had the messaging, understood the value proposition? Like, where was Block when you came in, and then what did you do afterwards?
Yeah. So our offering at Block has evolved a lot over the last couple of years. When I joined in late 2022, what we offered was a bit of a one-stop shop. So you'd come to us and you'd say, I want to redo my house. Maybe I want to redo my kitchen or my bath or the whole house or a whole floor, whatever the scope. And we would pair you with a great contractor who we had vetted who was in our network. And then we would do a ton to help you succeed in the build. So we had architects in house who would do your design. We had a permitting team who would do your city permits. We would procure, warehouse, and deliver in a single pallet all of your materials. So think about flooring and paint and tile and countertops and glass and fixtures, all these things. And by the time the contractor came to actually do the build, everything was there ready to go. And the contractor and the homeowner would just focus on getting the build right. We would do everything else. And I would say that made sense for a very specific segment of like wealthy folks who have no time and don't have many choices. If you're working 100 hours a week at Goldman Sachs, you don't care if the grout in your bathroom is charcoal or light gray. You just want it done because you're spending all your time working.
Hmm.
But the thing is, most people actually really care about those things, and they do have hundreds of preferences around their space. And because we were so involved in the execution, it really constrained what we could offer. Not to mention it was super complex. And so what we teased out was this was actually a huge limiter to the value that we could put out in the market. And what homeowners wanted was a lot more flexibility to make these different design choices, to work on different spaces, to engage to different levels with their design and with their contractor. And so we shifted to much more of a marketplace model that's now AI enabled that is both more scalable and more flexible for homeowners.
This is awesome because it touches on something that I am very specifically interested in, which is that is such a major. So I guess the context that I'll give is that the way that you put it is awesome. I mean, you hear a lot of stories, a lot. It's just the successful ones of businesses that are able to make such a massive change in their business model, in their strategy, in their growth strategy, and come out successful on the other end. And I feel like you hear a lot of these things where it's like, well, one thing wasn't working, we found out what wasn't working, we changed to something that was, and it was great. And everyone that's wants to be an entrepreneur or growing their business is like, wow, I want to do that. But I think in practice, when you're in the middle of it, which is why it's so exciting to me that you get to speak on this, when you're in the middle of it, it's such an ambiguous thing where you're talking about, well, we have this company where we're making revenue and we have a hypothesis that this is limiting our growth. Like, we have some segment of customers that we're listening to that are saying that this is, but is this the right segment of customers to listen to? Like, how much investment does it take to switch our business model to this marketplace to enable AI? Like, how does it change the trajectory of our hiring, of our fundraising, of our whatever, all those questions that you can speak to better than me. And so when you were in that space before you made the transition, is this a decision that takes all of the management team, or is it up to you? Is it something that takes a week? Is it something that takes 3 months? Is it something that, how much data do you need, before you feel comfortable saying we're doing this, versus, hey, this is a good hypothesis? Because you have good hypotheses all the time if you're constantly learning, like you're saying. So with such a massive, transition of business model like you're speaking to, what does it actually look like to go through that pivot
Yeah.
evolution?
Yeah, I think at most startups, perfect data is a luxury that does not exist.
For
You
sure.
can't run a perfect A/B test. You can't wait for 95% statistically significant results. You have to take what data you have and run with it and keep searching for more data and more signal. So for us, we were seeing that as we grew, and we had strong growth, as we grew, things actually got more and more complex. And that made us kind of scratch our heads and say, like, well, we're actually saying no to a lot of projects. Homeowners want all these things that we just can't do because our model is so rigid. That was one data point. So we decided to pilot this marketplace, and we took a risk. We piloted it in a couple of markets that together were about 30-40% of our business. And you might say, like, holy shit, that's a really big chunk of revenue you're putting at risk. But it was worth it to figure out, actually, is this going to be the future of the business? And if not, we would run a different pilot and then a different pilot. But that was more important than preserving what we had. And when we ran those pilots, yeah, we didn't wait for like massive good, tens of millions of dollars until we said this is the way to do it. We saw early traction. We looked at leading indicators. We saw like how many homeowners are engaging with this, how many are getting bids from contractors. Oh, suddenly we can service a much wider range of projects. That was enough signal for us to actually take the jump and say, we are no longer selling the old thing, which we had been selling for 5-6 years. We're moving the new business entirely to this new thing. And by the way, this new thing, this is kind of on a prototype. We have to rebuild the product to do it. And we're going to do that while we move the entirety of our business to it.
Yeah, right. So this is something that's ongoing now. It's not something that was specific to when you first came on.
So we piloted it shortly after I joined, about 3 months after I joined, and then
Okay.
we launched the pilot 3-4 months. We launched the pilot February of 2023. We moved the whole business over to it in May of 2023.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. And so then as like conceptualizing the transition, so it's been about uh 2 years since
That's
you
right.
transit, and you're still transitioning, or it's like,
No, no, no. This is the model.
okay, cool, cool, cool. Awesome. So then, okay, so then you're saying that, in the theme of constantly learning, constantly doing tests, is this pilot concept something you guys are continually doing? You guys are continually piloting different things, continually testing, trying things?
Yeah, totally. Now we're not piloting vastly new business models all the time.
Right,
We have a
right,
lot of
right.
conviction in the business model we're building against,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
we're
yeah.
constantly running experiments. And there's um, my nudge is always like, let's not look for the perfect experimental setup. Let's figure out the fastest way to get signal. And the emphasis is always on speed because you have such an opportunity cost. Like running an experiment that runs 2 weeks versus 2 months, it's a huge difference. Because if it runs 2 weeks, you can get the next version out in 2 weeks. If it runs 2 months, Like your first version will never be the final version. I always think of our current version of the product as a stimulus for learning. It's never going to be final. Like the product will constantly evolve, but you want to get that signal as quickly as possible so you can run the next experiment, learn the next thing.
So, and it's okay if this answer changes depending on the kind of test that you're running, but when we're speaking about signal, to my understanding, it's like, okay, we have the signal, we have enough information, we've ran this test enough to make the decision or to test the hypothesis, yes or accept it or reject it that we move forward with. How, with the emphasis on speed and with perfect data being a myth, what is enough signal? Is it, are there best practices, statistical significance, things like that, or is it mostly, your style of leadership as a CEO or executive team?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the main question, if you look at an early result, is like, what's the chance that this is a fluke?
Mm-hmm.
And statistical significance is like the ironclad way to say, what's the chance that this result is a fluke? Um, there are different ways to look at that. So, for example, let's say we were testing something as specific as like, for a homeowner who wants bids, should we give them 3 bids, 10 bids, 20 bids, or 100 bids?
Okay.
Right? Like that's a huge range. On the one end, you have 3 bids where you're saying, I'm really curating bids for you to take the work off your plate so you don't have to go and talk to 100 contractors. At the other end, you're saying, I'm getting you as many bids as possible, full competition, so you have as much choice as possible. The answer is probably somewhere in the middle. But when you run that test, you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I get signal as quickly as possible? If you want to run a perfect test, you might run like a four-legged prong test to do all these things against each other and look for 95% confidence. Or you could say, like, run 2 things against each other, one with a lot of bids and one with very few bids. And then you're like, okay, is many more bids or many fewer bids better? And then you optimize within that. You're trying to cut through the noise as quickly as possible. And it's not perfect statistics, but you're seeing like, is there enough of a difference between those two groups that it's unlikely to be a fluke? If the difference is like 45% versus 47%, where you're like, that's a rounding error. But at some point, that difference is big enough where you're like, oh, this is telling me something. Let me prod at that and refine that some more.
So the example was around product testing, like different features, different things that you guys can implement into your product. There's also a lot of discussion and implementation of what you're saying as far as growth goes. And, what you said at the beginning is that you came in and you headed that team as well. So the next thing that I'm curious about is, well, first of all, how widely does your approach for testing different hypotheses, how widely does it vary, your approach between testing different product features or testing different like messaging or outreach or different growth tactics and stuff like that? And then the following question would be about how do you build a system where you can cleanly take in data, organize it, analyze it, optimize for speed and stuff like that. But the first question is it different or is it the same between product and growth strategies?
Yeah, really good question. We run tests on growth all the time, and that's new channels, that's new campaigns, that's new messaging. I think that there's an art to figuring out when you test versus when you just launch. I think it's very easy to over-index and try to test literally everything. Like some
Yeah,
marketers try to test every line of copy, every piece of creative.
yeah,
And at some point, you just drown in tests.
yeah.
At some point, you have to say, like, I have conviction that this is our value prop. Yeah, maybe I can test different ways to phrase it, but ultimately, this is what I'm trying to build for consumers or enterprises, whoever your users are. So for us on marketing, yeah, like we just rebuilt our homepage. We tested it, but with a homepage, you get so much traffic, you can get signal in a week or two, and it's worth it to do that. Um, but on like some backlander that a fraction of people reach, if it's not a huge part of your growth strategy, just build something that you think makes sense and park it. And like, if nobody clicks your CTAs, yeah, you might want to revisit that. But if it's vaguely in line with expectations, it's probably not what you prioritize. So I think you have to be selective in like where you focus your testing energy and your attention, because you also then want to follow up on that and run the next test, the next test.
Yeah.
So there's like a limited surface area of the things that matter, both on product and distribution, where you want to constantly be iterating and testing. That's your first question. And your second question, yeah, data is massive. You definitely want data. Um, and I would say you want both quantitative and qualitative data. I think sometimes people over index on the quant, and this is where like the constant search of statistical significance comes up because all they have are the numbers to look at. And so, I mean, we track so many things across our product, across all of our marketing channels, across our site. We're constantly looking at that. But the qual also matters. So we will talk a lot to users or visitors or consumers at large. And where the qual is really powerful is actually complementing the quant to explain the why. So let's say people are clicking or not clicking on something, or they're engaging or not engaging. You want to understand why. Is it because like the creative doesn't make sense? Is it because the copy is confusing? Is it because the value prop doesn't even resonate? The other thing that qual does really well is generate hypotheses and generate ideas. So you might talk to somebody and they might tell you something that explains what you see in the data, but they might also tell you something that completely catches you off guard. Some of the best signal is when you feel surprised. And that internal experience of surprise means like, man, my brain really was not expecting this. This is a new piece of signal. Let me go explore that.
Hmm. So with that in mind, and I'm totally open to being partial to certain tools and things like that. But as far as when your team are testing and you're let's see, in order to get to this place where you can cleanly have a meeting, have a conversation where you say, here's the qual, here's the quant, here's my level of surprise or not surprise, here's our conversation. I feel like behind that is weeks or months, depending on the test of testing, data collection, organization, analysis, all of these things. So what is your tech stack? How do you use these different things? Like, what is your system for being able to test at the rate that you need to in order to be, grow
Mm.
successfully, as far as your growth channels go, whether it's sales or marketing, or again, if it's the same with your feature testing, then that too. But I am curious about, like, tangibly, on a daily, weekly, monthly clip, what is the system that you guys are engaging in that allows you to run tests and be as in line with your user as possible?
Yeah, good question. So we use all the standard platforms for individual channels. We use GA4, we use AdWords, we use Meta, all those platforms. At the end of the day, everything also then dumps into our SQL database, which lives on Snowflake. And we use Sigma a lot for visualization. So we used
Okay.
to be a Looker shop, we used to use that. But our data is unified when visualized through Sigma. Individual teams use their own tools. So our SEO team has their own stack. Our performance team has their own stack. Product lives in Mixpanel, does a lot there, but everything at the end of the day is unified in our database in Snowflake and then visualized through Sigma.
So I have a lot of my focus, a lot of my interests, my questions are about specifically growth of companies. But I think you're in an interesting position because you went from heading up that team to now you're in a new role as CEO. So for people out there who might not have the visibility into what that looks like, how different is your
Mm.
how different is your role, how differently do you show up, how what teams are you involved in, not involved in, what things are you thinking about on a daily basis uh now compared to your previous role?
Yeah, good question. As I think about the transition from COO to CEO, probably a couple of things jump out. One is obviously the scope of the role expands. So now I'm a lot closer to product. And I love that. Ultimately, I think product is a massive way that you must deliver value to your users. And so much of the company strategy is product strategy. It's what you choose to build, whom you choose to serve, how you serve them. It's not only product. Distribution really matters. Growth really matters. There are plenty of products that are built with poor distribution. And what that means is they just never get users. I think Everybody knows that build it and they will come is not a good strategy. You need to figure out how to make people aware of your product, how to get them to consider it, and eventually how to bring them on board. So being closer to product is one thing. Another piece that's been a big change that I enjoy is being more externally facing. As a CEO, you spend more time, of course, with your investors and your board. You spend more time with other people, learning from other CEOs, swapping notes with other operators, doing things like this, keeping a broader eye on where's technology going, what's happening with the consumer, where's the market going as well.
So changing speech just a little bit as we get towards the end. Um I really I love so much, and that's again why I do this speaking, meeting, talking, hearing people like you speak about things, because I think it takes a very particular kind of individual to lead a company in the way that you are, to have the type of experiences that you've had. So and then I'm going to leave it open so you can take it in any direction that you want. But I'm curious about you, as this leader of a company that's doing that's having that's very established, having a lot of impact in the world. How do you approach yourself? How do you approach your headspace? How do you
Mm.
approach your emotions? Like, what type of person does it take from your perspective to be in the position that you are?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think one thing that is a huge determinant of success in startups is just persistence. Like if you look at why companies fail, they run out of money or co-founders have a falling out. But at the end of the day, it's because people give up and they give up in different ways, and like if you're willing to keep going, there is always a way to keep going. And I am somebody who is, I think, quite persistent and quite obsessive. And so I think just like staring at hard things and finding opportunities to learn and to grow from those things is really important. The other thing is, I think, finding balance. So, one thing that I think is really challenging is when people's whole identities become tied up in the companies they lead. And, I do think kind of an obsessive personality is predictive of success. Like, you can't half ass your way to success in building a company. But the way I take that on is I am obsessive about multiple things. And for me, those things are building companies and running. So I'm an ultra runner. I run competitively. And
That's
it
so cool.
I can never do anything at like 50%. I always do things at 200%. And the two things that I do at 200% are building and running.
That's amazing. When is are you? Do you have a next one on the calendar?
Good question. I have a couple of things in play for the fall potentially. Yeah.
Whoa! Oh my god! I'm gonna put it in my calendar. I'm gonna be like, "Let's go, Julie." But so what? Beautiful answers. Similar question. Like for you personally, what has this? And it's new. It's this year. It's still, which is awesome. What has this experience leading Block COO been for you personally? Like how have you had the opportunity to grow so far?
Yeah. I mean, more than anything, it's just a tremendous honor. Like as a leader, CEO, CEO of any team, you have such a privilege of leading people and helping them hopefully to do some of the best work of their careers, looking out for their growth and giving them opportunities to grow and helping them to figure out what their next step or what their journey is like. And like nobody on your team will probably spend their entire career with you, but you're an important step on their journey. So that I consider that a massive privilege, and I'm really grateful for the ability to lead this extraordinary team every single day. Um, yeah, I think in general, when you lead a company, you're on a long journey of ups and downs, and I think there's so much learning in that, which is so valuable, and kind of embracing both the ups and the downs and celebrating the highs and learning the lows, just having the awareness that's coming. It is a lot like an ultra marathon, by the way. Like in ultra marathons, you have extremely high highs and you have horrible, despondent lows.
I
It's
love
just like
that.
building a company. But I think it's just like such a formative journey. It really shapes you as a person, and I'm really
Nice.
grateful for it.
Good. Well, I love that. So I'm excited for your answers to these two. My favorite questions to ask is first, from your perspective, and it could be completely, straight up business related. It can be, personal, like we're talking about. But at the moment with Block, what is the, if you could just choose your favorite, maybe, because I'm assuming there's multiple, but the largest hurdle that you feel like you are experiencing at the
Mm.
moment, and how is it also an opportunity?
Yeah, good question. I think the largest hurdle is like, how do we ship product as fast as possible? Like, we have so many hypotheses.
Mm,
AI is really changing the game on things like design, things like cost estimating, things like helping homeowners to work with contractors. We have such a strong conviction of what we need to build. We're just
mm.
trying to build as quickly as possible and get signal as quickly as possible. So I'm super excited about that.
Got it. And then second, in general, it could be something overarching, it could be something small, but what inspires you to keep going?
Yeah, I think just continuing to learn, you know,
Hmm.
and that's not just for me personally. That's for Block as a company. Um, I think the my main job as a CEO is to work with our team and help our team to figure things out as quickly as possible. And that's like figuring out how exactly do we serve homeowners and contractors? How exactly do we do growth and distribution? What resonates? And yeah, I just find that super exciting. Like those aha moments every single day. You're like, okay, we're one step closer. We have a long journey ahead. We're 1% done, but we're like one step closer. We figured out something new. Let's go. What's the next thing?
Nice. Cool. Well, if someone, wow, what a packed combo. I am super inspired. And if anybody else was inspired to either connect or follow along your journey, what's the best way to do so?
Check us out on at blockrenovation.com. So if you're interested in figuring out what you could do with your space, you can play around with our AI tools for design and estimating. Or if you actually want to go and build, you can find some awesome vetted contractors in our network. And personally, you can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Cool. Julie, this has been so awesome. I'm excited to be in touch not only about Block, but your ultra marathoning. And yeah, we'll be in touch in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Blake. This is fun.
Beautiful. You got to talk to you soon.